You know, this thing in the Middle East is heating up, obviously. Hamas has rejected the ceasefire proposal advanced by Egypt. But I was asking myself today, and you could do the same thing, would Israel want to get involved in Gaza? Would it be a swamp like Vietnam was for the United States? And what could happen? I mean, they want to go in and get rid of those rocket launchers that Hamas has used by sending several thousand rockets against Israel. But how much involvement do they want? And so you can imagine the people in Israel are saying, well, we're not sure. Well, we're going to have an in-depth report on that today, and other interesting things, including Katie Pavlich talking about the Democrats' war on women. Wendy.
Looking forward to that, Pat. Well, some are saying that Hamas is only hurting itself by provoking an Israeli ground invasion. Chris Mitchell has that story from the Israeli-Gaza border.
Diplomacy failed to convince Hamas to stop their fighting. Since the proposed ceasefire, they shot dozens of rockets into Israel. Several hit and one killed an Israeli next to the border.
Hamas isolated itself, and the entire world called upon them to end the fire. If they continue, despite of the proposal, they will only bring more suffering to their own people.
The breakdown of the ceasefire makes the possibility of a ground offensive more likely. That means urban warfare, house-to-house fighting, and the possibility of more casualties on both sides. But some experts say that's the only way to eliminate the threat from Hamas rockets.
We should come back to do ground operations. This is the only way that the other side will understand that we are really determined to keep our abilities to live here.
Israeli analyst Kobe Michael says Hamas may be committing political suicide.
Now, when they act so aggressively, and mainly and especially when they just rejected the Egyptian proposal for the ceasefire, actually they might drag Israel to a much broader ground operation in the Gaza Strip, and the end result of this operation will be the loss of their power, political power in the Gaza Strip.
Many residents of Sderot next to Gaza feel for the people there, but say the IDF does what it can to hit Hamas while protecting civilians.
We do mourn for the civilian casualties. By the other hand, Israel is one of the few or even only armies in the world that will give you so many warnings to tell people we are going to bomb here, get out. They are trying to target where all the rockets are, so they try to do the best so that they can get people out of the fire zone.
Israel's campaign intensified. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, without a ceasefire, Israel's answer is fire. The IDF estimates they've destroyed about 1/3 of the Hamas rockets, much of the manufacturing capability to make those rockets, and many of the headquarters of Hamas commanders. But whether that's enough to force Hamas into a ceasefire anytime soon remains to be seen. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Gaza border.
Well, the Israelis are facing the possibility that if they get deeply involved in a ground war in Gaza, then Hezbollah hits them from Lebanon, and some of the, maybe ISIS or some of the other radical groups in Syria come across the border from that part, and then Iran comes in. It's a very touchy thing, and I would think strategically our Israeli friends would be very, very wise to exercise caution and say we just can't get into that swamp. But I'm not sure that that counsel is going to be followed. I hope it is. Well, here at home, the Democrats in the Senate are creating a new bill. They say it's going to protect women's health. But critics say their real agenda is something else. John Jessup has more on that story from Washington.
Pat, some pro-lifers call the new measure the most radical pro-abortion bill ever considered by Congress. The bill supporters say they're trying to undo many new state laws that restrict access to abortion. But opponents say Congress is trampling on states' rights. Paul Strand has a story from Capitol Hill.
The Senate is now considering a bill that many pro-life groups warn would gut almost every meaningful restriction on abortion.
The bill being advanced today would literally overturn hundreds of pro-life, pro-women laws across the country. We're talking laws to end sex selection abortion, third trimester abortions, abortion on babies that are more than 5 months old and capable of feeling pain. This is an extreme bill.
Why would Democrat lawmakers push such a bill in a country that polls suggest is becoming increasingly pro-life?
Well, it might be that they're looking to the November 2014 elections and the fact that they might well lose control of the Senate. So they could see this as a last do-or-die chance to pass any serious liberal legislation.
And co-sponsors of this bill say it's needed to counteract what they label underhanded laws, supposedly meant to protect women's health, but actually aimed at curbing abortions. In just the last 3 years,
states across this country have enacted a total of 205 provisions that restrict women's access to safe abortion services.
These obstacles have put many women in desperate circumstances, some of which may very well endanger their lives. We need laws that put women's health and safety first, not politics.
200 of these underhanded laws have been passed, and it is not right that women should have to go to court year after year after year to get the medical services that the Constitution guarantees them.
But some testifying at this hearing said the bill is actually an unconstitutional attack on the states.
Essentially, this law guts states' rights with respect to abortion. It creates abortion as a special protected class of procedure and abortion providers as a special protected class of providers.
And Representative Marsha Blackburn warned Democrats they're risking the wrath of voters by appearing so enamored of abortion rights.
Many of your constituents perceive that this body is out of touch with the consensus opinion in this country. Public opinion polls show time and again that the American people support limits on abortion.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Pat, one headline described this bill as touching off the political war over abortion.
Well, we're going to be talking about an author who talks about the phony war on women that has been raised, and this is just one more part of that game. But the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, some of the abortion clinics are appalling. They bring these women in and put them on dirty sheets that somebody else has had an abortion ahead of them. There's no antiseptic procedures. No hospital in the country would ever permit some of the things at these abortion clinics. They're factories. I'm head of the American Center for Law and Justice. I'm the president of it. I don't do very much except have a title, but nevertheless, that organization has a lawsuit now against Planned Parenthood of California. A whistleblower in Planned Parenthood has indicated that Planned Parenthood has triple billed the United States government for procedures that they claim they provided. And we're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars of fraudulent activity. And it's time somebody starts saying, look, this is nonsense. This has nothing to do with women. We want to give health to women, but these clinics should be licensed. The people performing these procedures should be skilled medical technicians. This is carving up the most intimate part of a woman, and botched abortions lead to death. And this business about safe abortion is just nonsense. They're not talking about safe abortion. They're talking about a full abortion for anybody, anytime, anywhere, and the American people don't want that. So I don't know what Congress is trying to pull, but it's not going anywhere. The House isn't going to pass something like this, so it's not going to happen. But it's just a game. But we'll talk more about a lady who's an expert, and it will chill you when you hear what she's got to say. John.
Pat, the drilling technology of fracking has delivered huge economic benefits to some parts of the country, but opponents argue it contaminates water supplies and air quality. The city of Denton in North Texas sits on a large natural gas reserve, and it currently allows fracking, but some residents put together a petition to ban new fracking permits. Well, last night, after 8 hours of testimony, the city rejected that idea, but the public will still get to vote on the proposal in November. Heather Sells reports on the debate in Denton.
The city of Denton, Texas is split over whether fracking helps or hurts the community. Denton sits on a large natural gas reserve, and fracking releases its trapped oil and gas by blasting water, sand, and chemicals deep into underground rock.
Fracking has made major improvements in the U.S. economy.
Believe it or not, the world's top oil producer right now is not Saudi Arabia or any other Middle Eastern country. It is the U.S., and fracking is a big reason why.
This is not a boom that's going to fizzle in 3 or 4 or 5 years. This is going to be a long time, a 30-year boom.
Fracking is also boosting the economy in North Dakota. Oil production in the state has zoomed up 600% in the last 7 years. Such economic benefits are significant, but those who oppose fracking in places like Denton say the environmental and health concerns cannot be ignored.
Since the fracking started, my children have had headaches, coughing, and nosebleeds.
If Denton votes against fracking this fall, it will become the first city in this top oil and gas producing state to say no to the new technology. That's why what happens in Denton is considered a litmus test on the future of fracking. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Pat, there's no denying that fracking has brought an economic boon.
Well, you know, the majority of the oil in the United States is in the shale. That's where it is. It's located in the shale, deep underground. And this technique that was discovered by a Texas oil man says if you get a vertical well down and then you can go horizontal for a certain length. Now, they found that if they go out as much as 1,200 feet, 1,500 feet and so forth, the yields grow up dramatically. Well, these wells are yielding 1,000 barrels a day, 2,000, 5,000. I mean, it's just extraordinary what they're getting out of them. See, they're expensive. They don't come cheap, but nevertheless. But the fracking part of it is absolutely safe. The pipes are sealed. There's none of this fluid or the sand that gets loose in the environment. I mean, it just doesn't. Now, they have been flaring some of these fracked wells because they've had so much natural gas, and so they've been burning that, and that's been hurting the environment. So they're putting regulations down on the use of the flaring, and it needs to be captured, the natural gas. But there's two big shales, but the Barnett is the one that's under Fort Worth, Texas, and they're in Denton and all over that part. It is very, very prolific. Up in North Dakota, it's called the Bakken Shale. There's another shale called the Eagle Ford that is very hot now in Texas, and the rigs are just going night and day to bring this out. And America has now become #1 in the world in the production of oil, exceeding Saudi Arabia and Russia. So this isn't something you want to play with, and I cannot conceive that people in Texas, which have benefited so enormously from the oil and gas industry, would vote in Denton, Texas, north of Dallas, to limit the fracking in the Barnett Shale, which is underlying that whole area. John.
Pat, Mexico is taking its campaign against obesity to the airwaves, or rather off the airwaves. The government will limit commercials on TV and in movie theaters for soft drinks, snacks, and other high-calorie foods. Agency France Presse reports those commercials cannot be shown on TV from 2:30 in the afternoon until 9:30 at night, and at 7 a.m. in the mornings to 7:30 p.m. on the weekends. The Mexican government says 70% of adults and 30% of children are overweight or obese. The government had already levied taxes on high-calorie foods and drinks. Pat, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg had a similar campaign against soda in New York. What's your take on governments getting involved in health issues like these?
You know, I'm not a fan of the nanny state. I think we ought to be able to live our lives. But the truth is, we are being victimized by the food industry, like it or not. They're putting stuff into the food that makes us hungry, makes us want to eat more of them. You know, the industry selling beer had what they call salt snacks, and one of the beer companies bought Eagle brand because they salt up the snacks, and the more the salty snacks you eat, the more beer you want to drink. And so the idea was to set up a thing where you ate more of the food or drank more of the product, and the Big Gulp and all the rest of it with Coke, it's loaded with sugar, loaded with high fructose corn syrup, and it's not good for you. But perhaps, like what happened with the cigarette industry, there was a massive crackdown on that, and maybe that's where it ought to be, but telling some retailer that he can't sell a 30-ounce or 32-ounce bucket of Coke, I think is ridiculous. All right.
Sugar's so addictive.
Huh?
Sugar is so addictive.
Oh, it is.
It's a drug.
It really is. But that's, you know, the reason we're fat is not just the Cokes and the soft drinks. That's just a part of it. I mean, look at the supersize, the stuff in the you know, McDonald's. And,
well, they hide sugar in everything now.
Everything's got sugar.
Yeah.
And high fructose corn syrup is, you know, bad stuff. Okay.
A typhoon has killed at least 10 people in the Philippines, and many more were reported missing, so the death toll could rise. More than 370,000 people evacuated into emergency shelters. The storm shut down the capital of Manila, and power went out in several places. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon has vetoed a bill that would have allowed trained teachers to carry concealed guns. The Democratic governor says arming teachers will not make schools safer, but supporters argue training and arming school personnel could save students' lives, and that school protection officers could respond to an attacker without waiting for police to arrive. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.